Hello students, welcome to the Durham College e-learning platform. I am Dr. Dilip Saikia, Assistant Professor of Economics in the Department of Commerce, Durham College, Tezpur. In today's lecture, we will discuss about demand analysis. This topic is a part of BCom second semester Business Economics paper. In our day-to-day life, we often hear the terms demand and supply. Demand and supply are the two words economists use the most. Demand and supply are the market forces that make market economy work, that determine the quantity of each good produced and the price at which it is sold. To know how any event or policy will affect the economy, you must think first about how it will affect the demand and the supply. Now let's discuss about the meaning of demand. Demand for a commodity is the amount of it that a consumer is willing and ready to purchase from the market at various market given prices during a specified period of time, which is generally a day, a week, a month, or a year. Demand is indicated by a consumer's demand schedule. A consumer's demand schedule shows the various quantities of a commodity that the consumer is ready and willing to purchase at different market prices. So in this table, which shows the demand schedule of the consumer, shows that at price 12, the consumer is ready and willing to purchase 10 quantity of the commodity. At price 6, the consumer is ready and willing to purchase 40 quantity of the commodity. There is a difference between the term demand and quantity demanded. When we say demand, it indicates the entire demand schedule, which shows the consumer's demand preference for a commodity at various market prices. On the other hand, quantity demand means demand for a commodity at a specific price. For example, at price 10, quantity demanded is 20, at price 4, quantity demanded is 50. Why do people demand? People demand for goods or services because they satisfy their wants. The want satisfying capacity of a commodity is called utility. Utility is a subjective entity and it resides in the mind of the people. Being subjective, utility varies with different persons. People know utility of goods by means of introspection. The desire for a commodity by a person depends upon the utility he or she expects to obtain from the commodity. The greater the utility he or she expects from a commodity, the greater his or her desire for that commodity. What are the main features of demand? Demand depends upon utility of a commodity. A consumer is rational and demands only those commodities which provide utility. Secondly, demand always means effective demand. That is, demand for a commodity or desire to own a commodity should always be backed by purchasing power and willingness to spend. Thirdly, demand is a flow concept. It is always expressed in terms of so much quantity per unit of time, which is generally a day, a week, a month, a year, and so on. Fourthly, demand means demand for final consumer goods. And lastly but not the least, demand is a desired quantity. It shows consumers wish or need to buy the commodity. Determinants of demand. Demand is determined by various factors. The first and foremost determinants of demand is the price of the commodity. And the price of the commodity negatively affects the demand for the commodity. Higher the price, lower is the demand, lower the price, higher is the demand. Money income of the consumer. In case of normal goods, the money income of the consumer has positive effect. Higher the income, higher will be demand for normal goods. Lower the income, lower will be the demand for normal goods. In case of inferior goods, which are low quality commodity, the income effect is negative. Then the third component is the price of related goods. Related goods can be substitute goods and complementary goods. In case of substitute goods, price of substitute goods have negative effect. That means, say, for example, tea and coffee are substitute goods. So if price of tea increase, demand for coffee will increase and vice versa. In case of complementary products, the price effect is negative. Say, for example, car and petrol are complementary goods. So if price of petrol increase, demand for car will decrease. Then fourth determinant is the taste habit preferences of the consumer. Then fifth determinant is the future price expectation. If the consumer expects that future price of the commodity increases, then the present demand for the commodity will increase. And in case that the consumer expects that the future price of the commodity decrease, then the present demand for the commodity will decrease. So the individual demand function can be expressed as dx, demand for commodity X, is a function of px, price of commodity X, in money income of the consumer, price of related goods, taste habit preferences of the consumer, and future price expectations. Market demand. Market demand is the summation of individual demand. Graphically, individual demand curves are summed horizontally to obtain the market demand curve. The determinants of market demand are all the factors determining the individual demand. In addition to that, the size of population, which measures the number of consumers, determine market demand. Larger the size of population, larger will be the market demand because there will be more consumers in the market. Distribution of the income and weather and climatic conditions. So the market demand function can be expressed as dx is a function of px, price of commodity X, y, income of the consumer, pz, prices of related goods, t, taste habit preferences of the consumer, e, expected price, then n is the population size, yt is the disposable distribution of income, and w is the weather and climatic conditions. Now let's discuss about the law of demand. The law of demand explains the relationship between price of a commodity and quantity demanded of it. The law of demand states that other things remaining the same, ceteris paribus, there is an inverse relationship between price of a commodity and quantity demanded of the commodity. Symbolically, dx is a function of px, ceteris paribus. Now, it says that if other things are constants, then as price of the commodity increase, demand for the commodity decrease, and as price of a commodity decrease, demand for the commodity increase. The law of demand depends on certain assumptions. The assumptions are that the money income of the consumer remain constant, price of related good remain constant, then taste habit preferences of the consumer remain constant, and there will be no future price expected. So if these assumptions hold good, then the law of demand will hold good. This is the graphical representation of the law of demand is called the demand curve, which is a downward sloping curve. Now, in this diagram, we can see that the demand curve is downward sloping, indicating the inverse relationship between price of the commodity and quantity demanded of it. It shows that at price 4, quantity demanded is 200, sorry. As price decreased to 3, quantity demanded increased to 220. As price further decreased to 2, the quantity demand increased to 240. So the demand curve is a downward sloping curve indicating the inverse relationship between price of the commodity and quantity demanded of it. Now, what are the reasons behind the law of demand? Means why the demand curve is a downward sloping curve, or why there is an inverse relationship between price of a commodity and quantity demanded of it. Basically, there are 3 reasons behind the law of demand. First, the law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility states that as the consumer consumes more and more quantity of a commodity, the utility derived from every additional unit of the commodity, that is the marginal utility, goes on decreasing. So as the consumer derives lesser and lesser utility from every additional unit of the commodity. So he or she will be ready to pay it. He or she will be ready to purchase one more unit of the commodity only if he or she gets that quantity at a lower price. So therefore, the law of diminishing because of the law of diminishing marginal utility, there is an inverse relationship between price of a commodity and quantity dependent of it. And this explanation is from the point of view of the utility. But the other most important determinants, or the reasons behind the law of demand, are income effect and substitution effect. Now, the income effect is due to change in real income of the consumer. Now, as price of the commodity changes and money income of the consumer remain constant, in the assumptions we assume that money income of the consumer does not change. So, keeping money income of the consumer constant, as price of the commodity changes, the purchasing capacity of the consumer changes. Take the example that the price of the commodity increase. Now, in that case, what will happen? If the price of the commodity increase, then the purchasing capacity of the money income of the consumer will decrease. Right? As a result, the consumer will be able to purchase lesser quantity of the commodity. On the other hand, when price of the commodity decrease, keeping money income of the consumer constant, the purchasing capacity of the consumer will increase, leading to more purchasing capacity for the commodity. So as a result, when price of commodity decrease, in the purchasing capacity of the consumer increase and demand for the commodity will increase. On the other hand, when price of the commodity increase, it leads to decrease in the purchasing capacity of the consumer, leading to lower demand for the commodity. Then the substitution effect. Substitution effect is due to change in the relative price ratio between the commodities. Now, when in the assumption we have assumed that price of related goods remain constant. So keeping price of related good constant, when price of a commodity change, the relative price ratio between the two commodity will change. So for example, take the example of tea and coffee, right? So when price of tea remain constant and price of coffee increase, so coffee will become relatively more costlier than tea. So as a result, people will demand less for coffee and more for tea, right? So this is what the substitution effect, and because of these three reasons, we can see an inverse relationship between price of a commodity and quantity demanded of it. Thank you.